Hey there, welcome to Spectrum Pulse, where we talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And here's one y'all been waiting for, from Tyler the Creator, CHROMAKOPIA. Yeah, there's a reason this review is late, specifically in how at this point I have no idea how to gauge my opinions on Tyler the Creator, an artist I really like as a creative force leaping across genres with an eclectic blur of influences, the sort of act where I'll watch as many interviews as I can because I really enjoy watching him talk about art. But there's been that lingering distance that prevents me from adoring his work as strongly as so many do, less because of a dislike of his intentions and more questions around some of the execution. A sprawling creative vision that occasionally hits an odd note that doesn't pick up that deeper resonance for me. I don't know, maybe it's some of the Pharrell worship or certain moments of lyrical swagger or awkward intimacy that don't feel as fully considered as you might hope for. It's also why he doesn't really evoke a lot of polarizing opinions from me, either positively or negatively. I mean, I like Cherry Bomb in retrospect a bit more than I thought I would, but Igor has kind of left me cold in some of the production choices that just did not stick. I've gone back to it since, still kind of on that same note, and I'm still just lukewarm on it 5 years later. And while I think Flower Boy and Call Me If You Get Lost are great projects, or very nearly on the cusp of being great, I think I'd argue the strongest moments of the latter ultimately nudge it into that higher tier. Well, I'd struggle to call either of them my personal favorites. Now, bizarrely, I think Tyler might respect that more than some of his fans, who crave that overwhelming praise they feel he hasn't gotten. I really do love that monologue of his that went viral, talking about how one's personal favorites, they diverge from that of critics, especially historically, and that allows for a broader diversity of viewpoints and introspection in the room. It's just a lot more of an interesting conversation. But again, that is also a larger conversation about the societal factors of cool and taste, and I already did that video essay last year. Go watch it, it's a lot of fun. I did a lot of work for it. Now, suffice to say, there was a lot about the CHROMAKOPIA rollout that I really liked. Dropping on his own schedule on a Monday in the morning, a fully formed album vision that didn't seem to fit clearly with the current sound or throwback. Call Me If You Get Lost had the benefit of fitting near 2000s nostalgia with hip-hop, with a more accessible approach and even some subject matter. And when I heard Noid, I got the feeling that Tyler was venturing into slightly uncharted genre-bending territory, and the fortuitous rollout time meant that I could take my proper time getting into it. So, like the last time that I was late to one of his albums, what do we get from CHROMAKOPIA? Well, here's the funny thing. There is a part of me that wants to call this Tyler the Creator's best album, at least since Flower Boy, where he takes the more daring sonic decisions of his last two projects and then synthesizes and refines them to pair alongside some of his sharpest and most personal writing to date, at least in his modern era, where Tyler proves that you can have that introspection but the bangers as well, hand in hand with the swagger to match. And maybe it's the fact that thematically, this is probably the closest by sheer happenstance Tyler and I are to similar positions in life, that some of these tracks picked up a unique resonance that I certainly did not expect. I mean, when you're in your early to mid 30s and contemplating what settling down with a partner and aging and having kids looks like, there is an emotionally raw and complex poignancy of which I've long known Tyler was capable, but could only sporadically showcase, and it came out a lot here. At the same time though, while there is more polish in the details, Tyler the Creator is always going to throw a few swerves in the execution that prevent this project from resonating as deeply or holistically as I would like. And for as much as my ears became acclimatized to the sound, I wish a bit more of it hit that profound power for me. So while it is great, called among the best of the year, I'm a little less sure. And honestly, I kind of want to start with the biggest inhibitor to all of it. Tyler himself. Not that he's a bad rapper by any means. His underrated bruising punchlines and tangible intensity while rapping is what got me on board in the first place, especially when he's lodged in that lower register with the thicker bass in order to contrast against his production. But like with all of his recent projects, he rarely stays in that range as a rapper or as a singer. He pitches his voice up more to his mid-range or a squeaky upper register, and a lot of his falsetto crooning is back in spades, and for me, me, it just does not have that same texture or magnetism. I've said it many times before. Now, some of that is intentional. The masks and deflection across this album, it's built to highlight how much Tyler is deflecting from being truly honest with himself, all the cracks in that confidence, especially when confronted with some of the harder issues that come with age, where pure ego just can't get you out of them. And from a pure performance standpoint, I think the range is impressive. It probably works best blended into the singing of Darling I with Tizo Touchdown, or the more somber Like Him. And I know on some level on the flip side, it is designed as provocation in some of the weirder moments. I just personally think Tyler is more convincing in specific vocal registers, and that makes some of those flourishes work a little less for me. That whisper on St. Chroma, or some of the hush singing on Tomorrow, they just feel a little underwhelming, or the higher register on Sticky that thankfully can be largely overlooked by everyone else. But you know what? A big part of that is because the content standpoint, this is some of Tyler's most interesting subject matter to date, where some of the eccentric performances can be a little bit distracting, even if, again, that might be part of the point. Because right from the jump, Tyler the Creator seems to be continuing some of the globe-trotting through line and the braggadociousness that was his hallmark on the last album, Call Me If You Get Lost, but it's tempered in a different way. The title of the album loosely translates to an abundance of color, and while it's an obvious tagline for the production, we'll get to it, it makes a lot more sense in contrast with how the album's sense of ego manifests, with the colors kind of dulled and intentionally muted behind a mask, sides of Tyler that he's actually holding back. Now, that would be insane to describe Tyler the Creator the past, 15 years. I remember the through line of Goblin, where all the confidence has been at the forefront. It's arguably been his greatest strength, especially recently, and especially when he broke down barriers, exposing his bisexuality and just kind of rolling with it. And let's be clear, a lot of that is still true, which is why the bangers here still go off, but the opening single Noid, which could play as another suffering from success song, it's more revealing of edges around his hermetic animosity. Now, that's not also precisely new. Tyler's been wanting to tell everyone to fuck off so he can be in his own musical space for so many albums now, as a big part behind Cherry Bomb. But now he's seeing consequences of that in real life, with Darling I exposing his struggles with aging and monogamy, and the possibility he might just wind up alone with his Grammys at the end. And even then, he sounds like he could be just fine for that, until Hey Jane blows the album wide open with perhaps the most well-realized pregnancy scare song in rap I have heard in years. Speaking from both male and female perspective, where suddenly all your plans for your life get short-circuited because you were reckless and careless that one time. It's viscerally empathetic in the best way possible, although I do kind of wish a woman, one of the women rappers on the album, could have played that other voice. But that's where you also realize that mask and bravado is shielding from a different fear, that of true self-expression, connection, maturity. It's Why I Killed You is one of the more fascinating songs on the project, about black hair, the most direct form of self-expression in direct opposition to white beauty standards, and where the sublimation of full expression there is something that Tyler tries to directly interrogate. It's why Judge Judy has him meeting a kinky girl in Europe where they had a few fleeting hookups, and you get the impression he was quietly wishing there might have been a little bit more, only to get a letter saying that she accepted him as is and basically had to come to her own self-acceptance because she was terminally ill. That letter was posthumous. It's a heartbreaking moment. And at its most stark form in Take Your Mask Off, it rips into middle-class kids in gang cosplay in order to protect their masculinity. See also That Mask. The preacher clinging to religion to hide his queerness. The wealthy housewife who dreams of flying off alone away from her family. And finally, well, Tyler the Creator himself, where for as ego as he has brought to the table, for all the shit he's talked, for all of his greed, has it really overcompensated for the reclusive fears and relationship angst, for potentially ruining a marriage, which reminds me a lot of Wiltshire from the last album, to his own terror of being a father because of his own absent dad? I mean, he muses on it more in What He Really Has on Tomorrow, but as we learn on Like Him, it was his mom's choice to step away from the relationship with his father. She's kind of devastated by guilt around it. It's a powerful contrast to her role of giving advice all across the album in vocal snippets, because in that moment her own bravado cracks and reviews her own insecurity and the cyclical nature of it. and it renders Thought I Was Dead as especially poignant. Tyler the Creator wants to keep growing. He wants to move forward. He's been doing that in his art for years now. That bigger step to find maturity, it's one of the most difficult, especially for him when he knows it would be so goddamn easy to cater to his less mature instincts. And yet there are so many who still want to find ways and keep him in the past. And it allows him to flip that confessional ego into a greater strength. The admission of, yeah, he did all that shit in his past. He's now owning it and plowing forward, providing context, especially in the face of those who would play fake within the culture that he loves, or those who would try to commodify and steal from it. It's why the album can end on a more potent, but more earned brand of ego, where the penultimate track of Balloon with Doechii centers blackness, regionalism, and queerness. And on the final song, he outright admits there is still more to do. He doesn't think he's ready to be a father just yet. He's too selfish. Hell, he hasn't even seen all his personal goals succeed. Although I will say, the cyclical nature of the album's composition creates some very pyrrhic subtext around that victory. I've seen a lot of comparisons between this project and Mr. Morale and the Big Steppers by Kendrick Lamar in the uncomfortable therapeutic angle, but I think the more stark comparison is how neither Tyler nor Kendrick are your saviors, where the message is complicated and mixed and often misconstrued because, well, humanity's like that, and the vulnerability in continuing their paths can feel frustrating because you wish they would be a little closer to getting there. So the question is, how much grace you're choosing to give them in the meantime. And yet where Tyler might actually have the edge is both with lower stakes, the whole hip-hop savior pressure, it's more internal to him than external in the culture, and you can tell there is a lingering question around that responsibility he's yet to consider, even as he kinda seems to want it, but also making more measured choices, having done a lot more of the internal work. But in a sense, when you're secure in your current place, even if it requires a mask, taking the leap going into discomfort and risk is all the more difficult, which is why the specter of age hangs so heavily over Tyler, as it's one thing that he cannot emphatically control, and it haunts him. But okay, what about the actual sound of the project? Well, again, here's where I'm arguably more conflicted, because it feels like the apotheosis of so much of what Tyler's been doing the past couple of years, really past 10 years. The noisy drill sergeant southern percussion across the bangers, the usual weird pivots that are flagrantly inspired by Pharrell for better and for worse, and the more liquid R&B and soul-inflected grooves across the more introspective moments, fleshed out by vocals spanning Daniel Caesar, arguably a little out of his more soulful range, to Childish Gambino, to Willow Smith, and even Tizo Touchdown and Santigold. Hell, between this and Dark Times by Vince Staples, that's twice Santigold has shown up in 2024 from out of nowhere to contribute very effectively, and very welcome contributions at that. And the guest verses themselves tend to be pretty strong, to the point where you just wish they got more time, with both Doechii and ScHoolboy Q showing up in spades. But on Sticky, we barely get 4 bars from Glorilla, Sexy Red, and Lil Wayne. About as much Sexy Red as I wanted, but I wanted more from Glorilla and Lil Wayne. I would have been fine with a 16 from at least those two. It's not like the album feels slow or lacking momentum or ideas. Now, what's interesting is that, again, many of the sonic ideas aren't that far removed from what Tyler has done before, but the mixing and mastering feels like it's been cleaned up significantly. That bass can still feel monstrously heavy and distorted on cuts like the buzzy, grainy clank of Rah Tah Tah, or the deranged Neptune's drumline knock of Sticky, or the wild trap of Thought I Was Dead full of all the horns, but it just doesn't clip the mix nearly as badly as it might have on Call Me If You Get Lost, and the mid-range melodies feel more robust and saturated compared to Igor. Again, the album's title was not lying, and the more liquid, pensive moments really stick for me. The fizzy pop around the R&B swells of Hey Jane, the shambling, watery guitars on Judge Judy. Although that stuttering breakdown alongside the warping vocals should have hit a bit better, what happens on the outro is way stronger, or you have the guitars peeling around the analog synths that just sound gorgeous on Like Him, where even after the transition with all of the barking, it somehow kind of works, but especially the elegant synth-inflected soul of Take Your Mask Off. But on the flip side, as much as the thicker knock of the drums on I Killed You kind of works, the kookier horns and flutes balanced out against that brighter acoustic line, it just feels designed to be playful, but winds up more wonky than it should be. Kind of similar to the guttural shouts alongside the acoustic guitars and horns on Tomorrow, or how the blubbery royal of Balloon, it's almost too chipper, especially with that Luke sample spliced in, that if it wasn't for Doechii matching a lot of that goofy energy in her delivery, it just would have completely derailed the tone. Honestly, I kind of get why some people think that it does. But as a whole, yeah, you know what, I'm comfortable calling this great, especially the more I've sat with the content. Now, does it have an immediate world-shattering standout like Corso? Likely not. But I also know that song went off so much more effectively with time to properly sit and capture that outside energy for me. And this is a project that really rewards the repeated listens, if only to align with the weirder wavelengths that I think Tyler pulls together, even if at this point he himself is the biggest frustration with this project. I don't know if I would call it his best, the competition is still really stiff there, but it feels like a culmination in the best way possible, taking the deeply felt introspection and swagger and then infusing it with production that is defiantly his own and showing all the more polish for it. So look, you probably already heard this album already, but if not, absolutely worth your time. It's certainly intriguing. Check it out. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you want to see more, please be sure to like, share, drop comments, subscribe. Yeah, I know I'm kind of late to this one, but again, I need to really sit and think about it, and this week has been plenty busy on its own. But again, I'm hoping that you guys, if you have any thoughts on it, please leave them down in the conversation down there in the comments. I'm kind of curious where Tyler fans fall on this, because it is an interesting project, especially in contrast to the rest of his. I think it really works, but I know some folks are a little more mixed. Beyond that, though, anything else I might be able to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if y'all want to get involved and help and support the channel, well, beyond buying my merch, I got links to YouTube memberships, or on certain higher levels, my Patreon is still active, where in certain tiers, you get access to emojis, you get access to, let's say, my schedule directly, so I might be able to cover this a little bit faster, or hell, just my Discord server where you can yell at me properly. Again, don't feel obligated, tough times, the option's available. Till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.